Now, like I said, we are working on circumference, which remember is the distance around the outside of a circle, and you can kind of see that on our illustration up here. It's kind of hard to see because of, but this thick black border on my circle up here represents my circumference, or the distance around the outside. I'm trying to highlight it in green here a little bit for you. That is our circumference, or the distance around the outside of my circle. Now, inside of this circle, I also have the radius drawn for you, which, remember, the radius is the distance from the center of the circle to the outside. And I also have the diameter drawn for you, which the diameter goes from one side of the circle to the other through the center. Okay, and those are important because those are involved in my formula. So let's go ahead and talk about how we find the formula. Yes, I would write down both formulas along with both examples. That's why we call these notes. Now, the R in our formula stands for radius. This symbol right here, remember, is pi. Now, pi has two values, or it has two numbers, I guess we could say. We could use the decimal version, which would be 3.14, or we could also use 22 over 7 if we needed a fraction version of it. Now, 22 over 7 is 3.14. I mean, if we were to look at that on a calculator, if I were to solve, see if you can see this here, if I were to do 22 divided by 7, that gives me 3.1428571, which is the value of pi. That's the fraction version of 3.14. Okay, that's how come we can use 22 over 7 or 3.14. Now, let's take a look at our first example here. Now, what does it give us on number 1? What is this right here? Yeah, that's the radius, and since it gives us the radius, I'm going to go ahead and use the formula that involves radius down here, the 2 pi r. So I know that my circumference is going to equal 2 times pi times the radius. Okay, so now I'm going to simply continue with my formula. I'm going to fill in values for all of these symbols up here, which obviously I know that 2 is 2, times, we'll say 3.14 for pi, times our radius, which is 28. Okay, once we have that, now we can actually multiply all of those numbers together, and that will give us the circumference of my circle. Now, I'm going to choose to multiply 2 times 3.14 first, because that equals 6.28. And that one would be a number that might be helpful to memorize, because on this formula, you're always doing 2 times 3.14, which is always 6.28. So we're really doing 6.28 times our radius, which in this case is 28. Okay, so when I whenever I multiply 6.28 times 28, that gives me a big number. So I'm going to have 6.28 times 28. When I multiply those guys together, it gives me 17,584. Now, I'm not done yet because I know that I have two numbers behind that decimal, so I have to move my decimal over 2 places. 1, 2. So my circumference for this one up here is going to be 175.84. Okay, that's my circumference for that circle right here on number 1. Okay, now let me show you one other way to solve this using pi as a fraction. Okay, because I want to show you that you can do it both ways. Now, the formula is going to be the exact same. Nothing's going to change about that. The only thing that's going to be different, is the fact that I'm no longer going to use 3.14 for pi, and I'm instead going to use 22 over 7. So, let me substitute my values back in here. So I'm going to have 2 times 22 over 7 times, now our radius is 28, so I'm going to change 28 into a fraction, so I'm just going to take my 28 and put it over 1. Okay? Now from there, I'm going to ignore the 2 for just a moment. Okay, and I'm just going to look at this 22 over 7 times 28 over 1. Now, what makes this, I don't want to say easier, but what makes it convenient is the fact that, look, I have a 7 right here, and I have a 28 right here. And 7 can go into both 7 and 28, so I can reduce those, if you will. 7 goes into 7 one time, and 7 goes into 28 4 times. Okay, so now I can multiply those guys out, which is going to give me 1 times 1. Obviously, that's 1. And 22 times 4 is 88. So I end up with 88 over 1. Now, I'm not done yet, because now I need to go ahead and multiply this times 2. So essentially what I'm doing is 88 times 2. Well, 88 times 2 just gives me 176, which, if you notice, it's different than the answer I got up here. Now, the reason why it's different is because, remember, pi, we're rounding pi to the hundredths place, okay? Because 3.14, remember, that's not the value of pi. The value of pi is a repeating decimal, 3.14159, and it goes on forever. So this 176 is close enough to this to be counted correctly. Now, I think this way down here is easier than multiplying times a decimal, but that again is up to you. Either way will give you the correct answer. It just depends on whichever way you want to do it. Okay? Great. Let's take a look at our second example here, number 2. Number 2 is a little bit different because, well, what do we call this line right here? Yeah, that's our diameter. And since we have our diameter, I'm going to use the formula that has the diameter in it instead of the radius. So I'm going to have circumference equals pi times the diameter. Again, I'll just substitute values in for that. So I'll have 3.14 times 8. Well, and that's going to give us our answer when we multiply 3.14 times 8, which gives us 2,512, and I have to move my decimal over 2 places, so I'm going to 1, 2 places. So my circumference is going to be 25.12. And it's that simple. Okay? Nothing on your lesson today is that difficult. As long as you can plug your numbers into your formula and remember how to work that formula out, you should get your answer correctly each and every time. All right, any questions on that? No? Fantastic. Then let's get to work.